Hello, it's me again at the beginning of another week in August. And Wellens been in the news. Uh, we've been in newspaper, been on Radio 4, and we've been talking about the restrictions in the high streets and kind of what the right balance is, etc., etc. Anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on that issue, but I want to think about one of the things behind it, which we've kind of discovered. I've been a bit on the sidelines. Others have been sort of driving that, but I've had an insight into the way the news works, and actually, quite impressed by those who come across the journalists and the sort of in questions they've asked and the care they've taken. Actually, journalists get a bit of bad press, but I've been quite impressed by them. But the thing, of course, that you noticed is, of course, that how quickly they move and how quickly news becomes old news. And they're never quite sure, even if they interview on one day, whether, by the time they get to broadcast it or print it a day or a couple of days later, whether it's to be relevant and, something else might have happened that means that your story gets bumped off the front page or off the headlines or whatever. So I was thinking about that. And then the other day I was thinking about something which was in the headlines a few months ago, if you can remember, before coronavirus. It's sort of sometimes difficult to remember what was in the news. Not actually Brexit, you'll be pleased to know, but something else. And that is that we were very worried about, and quite rightly very worried about, pollution, particularly plastic pollution, and the enormous amounts of sort of unrecyclable plastic there are, particularly sort of in the oceans and other sort of very places you wouldn't expect it to be, but where it's kind of accumulated and what it's done to the environment and to wildlife. And I was thinking about that and about the fact we didn't, I suppose we kind of knew about it, we didn't, but then if you remember, sort of Attenborough had the program, I think it was Blue Planet, which talks a lot about this sort of thing. And suddenly it was sort of in the centre of the news. It was what we were thinking about, and we were all sort of desperate. They were trying to cut down on single-use plastics. I say all this because, of course, as I say, the news cycle moves fairly quickly, and it seems an age since we were thinking about those things. And now, of course, we're in the middle of COVID-19 and all the things we're having to do to overcome that. But it did, occur to me as I ordered another load of sort of plastic shields and face masks, and there's been gloves and everything else. And of course, one of the side effects of COVID-19 is that really most people of the planet are using a lot of mostly unrecyclable one-use plastics, whether it's for PPE or whether it's just, I notice to go in shops and, understandably, in a sense, everything is sort of wrapped up, hermetically sealed. And, a lot of places where you would have got a cup of tea or coffee will now give you, something plastic and throw away, just the sort of thing we were trying to get away from 6, 8 months ago, has now kind of come back again as being the norm. So I'm a bit kind of concerned about that. And I suppose, it's one of those things. I mean, I'm not knocking the efforts, and of course, people who are dealing with, the sort of hard end, as it were, of COVID-19 have to have PPE. I mean, I use it myself. There's no argument about that. But I do think it's just slightly too easy to forget about sort of other issues terribly quickly. And of course, there may be ways round things. It may be, for instance, that there are alternatives which are, single use but are biodegradable, or there may be alternatives that, they're not single use. You could use, I'm guessing, face masks. You can get cloth ones which you can wash and use for quite a long time. And so it got me thinking about, whether there are things that we ought to be thinking of as we deal with COVID-19, that we don't lose sight of everything else. I think more widely, this is one of the problems, I think, for people who are trying to do the right thing and trying to be conscientious in the world. It always strikes me that we are kind of faced with an impossible calculus. I mean, we just don't have the information or the knowledge, etc., to really know what the repercussions of our actions are, what are the unintended consequences of the choices we make. And I think, in a sense, we can't be blamed for that. We can't, in every moment and every action, be thinking about what we do and what the consequences will be. I always remember there's a bit in C.S. Lewis, I can't quite remember it is, but he says, in the end, which invention will have sort of killed more people, processed food or the machine gun? Now, that's sort of a quite dramatic way of putting it. And I mean, I guess Lewis was writing that sentence sort of well over, half a century ago. But in that sentence, yes, what he's trying to point out is that we are trying to make these impossible decisions. Of course, the machine gun is not a nice piece of equipment, and on battlefields has killed many people. But in a sense, it's comparatively rare compared to processed food. And who knows that that might have, because often it's not terribly healthy, etc., and has replaced more healthy alternatives. It might in the long run have cost more lives. We don't know. So, as I say, all we can do is just try and stay alert and be thoughtful. It was, just my thought about the sort of the plastics. I suddenly realized myself that in trying to do the right thing with COVID-19, I was just suddenly using just extraordinary amounts of unrecyclable plastics. So I think the best we can do, as I say, is try and inform ourselves about these things so that we might care in a sort of holistic way for God's world, to try and think about the decisions we make and about what they do to other people, what they do to our environment, and how we are best able to serve Him thoughtfully. Thank you.